Hello, folks. This is the Ticker Guy coming at you over the Labor Day weekend. Last holiday, really, that we're going to have before we get into the winter months. Of course, who knows what they're going to try to do with masking kids and making Halloween trick or treating not any fun this year. I want to bring you up to date on the latest data and point out a number of things. The last video I did, I think it was quite clear that absent some kind of malfeasance by government agencies and healthcare workers, this bug is the flu. And frankly, it is probably less than the flu because even in our area, I think it's reasonable to believe that LeConte Medical Center, which is the local hospital here, is not treating people aggressively and early with interventional therapies, which may reduce the risk of bad things happening if you get COVID. In fact, if you go to Sevierville's webpage and Sevier County's, their advice is if you have mild symptoms, stay at home. If you have anything severe, then contact a healthcare provider. Well, folks, as I've pointed out, all the way back to February and March, the entire point of this thing has to be to keep you out of the hospital. Of course, that doesn't make anybody any money. And we now have a situation and have had a situation with this disease where money collides with life. And unfortunately, it's extremely profitable, very profitable for medical industry people to do things that they can throw up their hands and say, well, it wasn't our fault because we didn't do anything. Well, not doing something, folks, is commonly called negligence when you have something you can do. I want to bring this up because I think this is a fascinating piece of information here. This is from I Effing Love Science. Just from a few days ago, only 1 in 10 medical treatments are backed by high-quality evidence. Okay, this is recent. You would think that when you visit your doctor, that you're getting something of the latest science. I mean, that's the point, right? That's why this person is being paid, and they are supposedly an expert and you are not. Well, as it turns out, no, that's not true. And this references a study here, which is from the article that's in the press, and this is actually kind of interesting because when you look at the data here, is to take a look at whether or not there's evidence to support the recommendations that are made to you by healthcare providers and professionals. And if you read this, what you'll find is that essentially most of them are not. That And this is a problem. 10% have high quality evidence. 37% have moderate quality evidence. 31% have low quality evidence, and 21.9% with very low quality evidence. So what this means is that better than half of the times that a doctor gives you some advice, they are backed by evidence of even moderate quality. Now, think about the implications of that, folks. Things like statins, things like dietary advice. One of the limitations that you have to be aware of, and they note this in the study, is that the evidence that comes along with things like, well, you should exercise more, is typically of very low quality because how do you do controls? How do you do a real trial outside of a laboratory? In a lab, you can put a rat on a treadmill, right? Or, a hamster wheel. It's pretty hard to do that with humans because controlling for false reporting or other confounding factors is very difficult. Okay, so, you say, well, going out and running is a great thing. Okay, that probably is. So you give everybody a Garmin and you have them log their data and, okay. How many of them go and drink 5 beers after they get done running and void the enhancement? Okay. So this is something to think about, folks. Some of this, some of this is due to the fact that you're making recommendations based upon things you just can't possibly do anything with. And then there's others, though, where we really do have a problem with the quality of the science and the recommendations are being made. And remember, we have, as I pointed out in the ticker that I wrote the other day, we have some history with this when it comes to things with emergent diseases. With HIV, there is a pneumonia that frequently kills people that have AIDS. It's called PCP. The actual agent, the infectious agent that causes it, we've recognized over the years is not what we thought it first was. So the actual name of the infectious agent has changed, but we still call the disease PCP. And the reason this is important, and I bring this up, folks, is that about 31,000 people in the early years of AIDS, all of whom were probably going to die anyway, died of PCP. Exactly 0 of them should have. And the reason is that we knew in 1977 that Bactrim, a inexpensive combination of drugs, worked to prevent PCP in immune-compromised persons. Now, how did we know this? Because we had been using it since 1977 in children that had leukemia. And yet, we didn't use it there. And remember, according to the law in the United States, a physician can prescribe anything that is approved for any purpose whatsoever if in his or her clinical judgment it is appropriate. And yet, you have pharmacy boards and others interfering with this. They did then. Anthony Fauci, in fact, refused to recommend that this be given fast-track expanded approval, okay, much as EUA, emergency authorization. And even though doctors could prescribe off-label, they did not. And as a result, 30,000-odd Americans went to the hole. Now, they were probably going to go to the hole anyway. And this is akin to what has happened here with COVID-19 in that an awful lot of the old people that were very sick and in nursing homes got this disease and died. Some of them did not have to get the disease at all if we had locked in caregivers. But many of them that did get the disease, we could have treated early. We had treatments that we had reason to believe would work, including by Anthony Fauci himself, because he himself said that hydroxychloroquine was likely effective against SARS and nobody needed to die. And yet he has resisted, as has the rest of the bureaucracy, any of these things. And HCQ, by the way, folks, is not the only one. Okay, there is emerging evidence that there are a number of other things involved here. Vitamin D, ivermectin. There's all sorts of data that is showing up. But again, you have nobody pushing for these interventions and trying to intervene. What you have is people that are trying to force ventilators on people. We did that early. We have people in actual practice that are not using them, which is a good thing. And for those who wish to excuse President Trump and everybody else, I want to bring this back up again because this data here, folks, came out of Wuhan very early on. 95% of the time you went on an event, you were dead. Okay, this was hard clinical evidence that ventilators were absolutely worthless. Non-survivor, survivor. Number of survivors with non-invasive mechanical ventilation, 2%. Number of survivors on invasive mechanical ventilation, 1%. In other words, you were dead. The p-value that this was random chance was, yeah, forget about it. All right, this is data from February and early March, folks. I've been bringing this up since it started. Nobody will take responsibility for what's happened. No one. Instead, we're all told to wear masks, for which there is no scientific evidence. And for that which we have scientific evidence that ventilators don't work, we built and bought tens of thousands of them at inflated prices on an emergency basis. Inflated prices tend to come with emergencies. And we shoved them down people's throats and they died. Now, folks, if that's the strength of the evidence, if that's what you're talking about, gee, maybe you ought to be rethinking your strategy here, huh? All right, let's go through a few more things because here's the state data again. And again, this is not new. You guys have all seen this before. This is from the COVID tracking project. And again, we have testomania here, but I am starting to ignore this number. And the reason is we are getting increasing evidence that these tests are worthless. They are detecting crazy numbers of positives that really aren't positive and are essentially, for all intents and purposes, pointless. All right, but what really does matter here is hospitalizations. These are current people in the hospital. Okay, we peaked out here around 1,400 in Tennessee. Right now, we're down 40%. About that, about 30 from that number. Okay, we're at 1056 right now. And notice that death peaked and is coming down too. All right, Florida has had a precipitous fall. Went from nearly 10,000 people in the hospital in the nines, currently about 3,500. So that's down by 2/3. Okay, that's huge. And again, test positive has gone down too. But and again, folks, one of the problems here is you got these sub-notes, these little things here. The COVID tracking project tries to pick this stuff up, but they don't pick it all up. We are getting a lot of very late reports, which means that the shape of this curve is inaccurate. That is a huge problem. All right, Arizona, same thing. All right, here we were what? We were at 3,466 hospitalizations. Where are we now? 740. All right, do I care how many people get COVID if nobody goes to the hospital? Of course I don't. I could care less. And I really don't care if nobody ends up over here in the dead column, right? But the reality is that if you don't even have to be hospitalized and there's nothing to fear, what you're going to be, we're going to wear masks because I'm worried about getting a cold. No, come on, folks. Use your heads, okay? South Carolina, you see this little uptick here. This is from the colleges. But again, oh, wow, man, we got all kinds of people coming up positive, but nobody's going to the hospital. So who cares? All right? Mississippi, same deal. We had this little spike and again, everyone's blaming us. Oh, the colleges, all those frat houses. Well, nobody's going to the hospital. Who cares? Okay, now Georgia has had a somewhat of an uptick here in hospitalizations. This is a little curious, and I'm kind of interested in this for one reason, and that is that viruses don't do this, folks. Okay, you don't go from 2,600 hospitalizations. All right, from the day before 2129, you don't have 500 people show up in the hospital in a day. Yet that's what the data says happened. So there is a data dislocation in here as well. And I'm wondering if this is really back here and it's being late reported. But, and again, this is part of the problem we're running into, folks. Politics are getting in the way of reality. All right. But again, the test numbers are coming way down, the positives. Texas has absolutely collapsed. They had over almost 11,000 people in the hospital. What do they got now? 4,200. Who cares? I don't care how many people are over here. I care how many people are over here, and I care how many people end up over here. Those are two things that are important. Louisiana, same deal. Okay? Crazy collapse. You're down here at half of where you were. Alabama has seen the same thing. Notice, big spike, supposedly blamed at Tuscaloosa and the university kids. Who cares? Nobody's going to the hospital. Literally, who gives a damn? All right. North Carolina, same sort of thing. Okay, again, scream. Oh, my God, Halloween Karens. All right, nobody goes to the hospital. Yeah. Arkansas, Hutchinson apparently is having a piss fest over the latest few days. Again, this one's a little more curious. But, let's look at the number of cases down here, 64,000. But here's an interesting point, okay? About 15% of the population, approximately in Arkansas, is black. Now, they are just over 2% test positive at this point. But that means that they are beyond the peak, and we're seeing that in the hospitalization numbers. Death lags, this will come down. But this is consistent with what we're seeing. This does not bother me. Again, if you're picking up people who are allegedly positive, but they're not getting sick enough to need hospitalization, I'm not sure I care. Remember, folks, and you gotta keep this in mind, okay? You're gonna love the Illinois thing, a big spike there. I'll explain that one in a minute. Remember one thing about this, okay, and that is the standard of care for this disease is do nothing if you're positive until and unless you need to be hospitalized. There is no outpatient treatment being given to people on a regular basis. There should be, but there's not. So, test positive is meaningless because it doesn't tell you anything, especially if you don't get the results back essentially immediately. Illinois, this is a data dump of old data. 50 days. 5,900 cases spread all the way back. God knows how far. Look, it's 150,000 tests reported in one day. That didn't really happen. This is why I am saying that we have to be very careful, because how many more of these are not showing up in the data? It's hard to fake a hospitalization. There's a body. It's also hard to fake a death. Same reason. Are we seeing any uptick in hospitalizations and deaths? No. Now let's talk about where we are seeing some upticks. What happened here? Down here, folks. Okay? You're just not at that 2% threshold yet. Same thing with Hawaii. Again, masks. Remember, from July 1st. How's it working out for those guys? All right. And then the last place I want to show you is, and the reason I bring up New York again is, oh my God, is a screaming started about how there's going to be a disaster. And it's not just there. The IHME is out saying that there's going to be we're going to double, basically, the number of dead people in the United States unless we all mask, universal mask, must have masks. And oh, by the way, it's not limited to the U.S. Let me point out the fraud that these people are committing. This is Sweden. Daily cases. Notice they haven't stopped coming up with the cases, okay? And by the way, if you were to extrapolate this, they have about 10 million people in Sweden. If you were to extrapolate this to the United States, go ahead, multiply by 33, right? We'd be, what would we be coming up with here? 12, 13,000 cases a day? 10,000 cases a day? It depends on the day, right? But we'd be coming up with pretty big numbers in terms of new cases. I don't care. I literally don't care. Why? Because since roughly the end of July, the last week of July, nobody's dying. And so I honestly do not care one way or another. I just don't care how many people you say are positive. And I want to show you the IHME projection. Look at this. If you would only all wear masks, remember, today, Sweden has about 5,800 dead people. All right, now, the IHME originally, along with everybody else, predicted 200,000 dead people in Sweden. 200,000, folks. They were off by a factor of 30. They're saying, if you don't mask, and easing, okay, remember, there is no easing because there's no lockdowns. There are no constraints in Sweden right now. There have never really been any, all right? But look at their projection. Oh, my God, 22,800 people. And if you just stay where you are, 12,817. Now, of course, stay where you are really is 22,806 because there are no mandates. But if you'll all just wear a mask, then almost none of those people are going to die. In fact, less than another 1,000 people will die. Almost nobody will die. But folks, nobody's wearing a mask now. What's this? Facts are what they are, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about the local variations of this stuff. You've probably heard about the nonsense in Rochester and the so-called Black Lives Matter, the Communists Matter stuff. We have so-called protesters going into restaurants, playing flip table and trash the place. We have more arsons being attempted. We have people climbing on residents' roofs and essentially attempting to invade their homes or at least their property. We'll see how long that goes on. We have had multiple incidents of this kind. The FBI finally showed up out west and started arresting people under federal statutes. You're only about 4 months late with that. We have a lot of people claiming that this is all just, election interference or whatever, and it's just a handful of little rioters. Look, folks, the screaming Karens that are yelling at you about not having a mask on, these people are the same crazies that are running around trying to trash things all throughout the country. And if you think they will just politely and pleasantly give up their power, and folks, they're not all Democrats. We have a mayor right here in Sevier County, Tennessee. There's another one in Hamblin County, which I just ran the numbers on. They reached suppression. They're doing the same damn thing. Okay? If you think that these people are going to relinquish this, or Governor Bill Lee for that matter, who is a Republican, I remind you, if you think they're going to relinquish this anytime soon, you got another thing coming. Until you start seeing states drop the emergency declarations, which as long as the federal government is handing out the cash, they are not going to do, this is not going to go away. And if you think this screaming Karen stuff is not going to get more and more violent, more and more in your face, and is not more pervasive, you're nuts. Do you think that this is just about Rochester? Do you think this is just about, oh, no. Who are they going into? Where are they going? You know where they're going? They're going into little, small businesses. What hospitality businesses are being destroyed right here in Gatlinburg and right here in Sevier County? The small businesses. Do you think Kroger cares about this? Do you think Walmart cares about this? They're laughing about it. How about Food City, another big chain? They're laughing about it. Why? Because you have to buy food. So, not only can they put up a sign, they now have the ability to call the sheriff and have you arrested for refusing. Oh, isn't that convenient? Otherwise, they'd have to give you a trespass, which requires the sheriff come out and give you a formal trespass, and then you can come back, you can be arrested. But short of that, on commercial property, that's how it works. No, they want the ability to turn around right now, on the spot, ticket you, fine you, arrest you on the spot, and it is all being driven by a bunch of crazies who are being backed by big corporate technology giants like Facebook, who will allow pressure campaigns at local politicians for masks, but will not allow you to set up the same sort of organization against. Why do you think Facebook wants to do this? Do you think it's because Mark Zuckerberg is a leftist? No. It's because Mark Zuckerberg is a monopolist. How would you like to have the only job available in your county to be to work at Kroger's or Walmart? And you cannot do anything on your own time outside because if they find out, they'll fire you. And then you have nothing and you starve. You are reduced to being nothing other than a slave laborer at whatever wage they are willing to pay. Under their terms and their conditions, you cannot set up or work for a small business because it will be destroyed. That is what's going on here, folks. You think that? You think not. You tell me. You go and you take a look at the businesses that were burned in Minneapolis, the businesses that are being destroyed in Portland, the businesses that are being destroyed in other parts of the country. What happened in Rochester? What is happening everywhere? You come down here and you take a look at all the small shops down in Gatlinburg and Sevier County. If you are complying with these mandates and you're putting these signs in the door and making people wear masks and you're going along with this stuff and you're doing it, guess what? You're slitting your own throat because all it's going to be left is the Outback, which is a chain, and the TGI Friday, which is a chain, and the Texas Roadhouse, which is a chain, and the Walmart and the Kroger and the Food City, all of which are chains. Your local establishment, forget about it. Folks, you need to go in and explain this to these people and to the chambers of commerce, many of which do not care about anybody except the big companies. Some of them do, but not all of them. And you need to point out to these people that you are talking about their survival here. And that they either fight back and you fight back, and you do it now, peacefully. You say, no, we're not complying. Because you know what? In Sevier County, there's 100,000 residents. In Hamblin, it's about 65,000. There aren't that many cops. Not even close. What happens if everybody says, bite me, and walks right in the door? And the business says, get out. Okay, you slit your own throat. We'll go next door. You want to go out of business? You go right ahead. But if you keep these mandates, not only are we not going to comply with them, we'll shop somewhere else. But in addition to that, if and when you think you're going to drop them and we're going to come back, you're wrong. We won't. And then you have to go one step further, which nobody wants to talk about, but we have to go there, folks. We absolutely have to go there. The bottom line is this. You're going to have to work corruption of blood. You're going to have to say, no, it's not just you. It's your family. I know you don't want to do it, but they're doing it. You know, you got Nancy Pelosi, you got all these other people. They don't believe in a word of this stuff. It's not just privilege, folks. You know, you have to understand something. Pelosi, just a few hours after she got her hair coiffed, she goes on TV and starts preaching about this stuff. And in the days and hours before, she doesn't believe a word of it. It has nothing to do with coronavirus. It has nothing to do with any of that. We know what the story is on that. Sweden has proved it beyond any doubt. And there was a tremendous pressure campaign put on Sweden. And if you think there isn't still, go back a few minutes in this podcast and look at that IHME graph. You think that is the only one? Oh no, all the models. They're all saying the same thing. Look, I caught the IHME back when this thing started, claiming that hospitals were using 3 times the number of beds that were actually in use at a given point in time. Did anybody call them on? Did anybody do anything about it? Nope. And guess what? Those guys are still being cited as authoritative. CNBC ran a big segment on it yesterday. Fox picked up on it. By God, if we do not do this, we're all going to die. And Sweden has put up the middle finger very decidedly, and nobody's dying. This is not about a political party, folks. Donald J. Trump is just as involved in this as is Joe Biden. Oh, yeah, Biden will make it worse. Don't get me wrong. So will Kamala Harris, who is probably going to end up being president, as you know. If you got a brain in your head, you can't possibly believe that Joe Biden is mentally competent at this point in his life to be president of the United States. It's sad. The man clearly is losing his mind. He's old. It happens to people. But it's happening now. So what does that mean? You're going to get a hardcore leftist who, by the way, was putting people in jail for getting high while she was smoking bongs herself. So if you think Nancy Pelosi is the only example of this, you're wrong. If you think Donald Trump is not an example of this, you're also wrong. He crammed all those ventilators into our system and spent all that money on them, knowing full well that they were worthless, because that data out of Wuhan was out at the end of February. We knew before he did any of this, before the 15 days to slow the spread and all this other nonsense, we knew that there was no value to them at all. We've not been trying things in clinical practice. We have eviscerated the clinical practice, the actual practice of medicine. You know, what do you call somebody, folks, who gets a D- in med school? You call them doctor. But contemplate the fact that we know the medical evidence for much of what we do is terrible. All right, fine. That's something we need to fix. But right now, what you have going on is an attempt to destroy the small business and the vitality, because small businesses are what creates a vital economy. It's what creates opportunity, and it's what gives you the ability, if you decide that you don't want to be a paper pusher, you don't want to be a checker at Walmart, you don't want to work at Kroger and stock shelves. That's not your shtick. You don't want to be a cog in a machine where, by the way, if you do not praise Black Lives Matter, you'll be fired. Oh, yeah. That too, right? If you will not go along with the corporate mantra 100%, and God forbid if you go out and you start something on the side, people get fired for doing that all the time, you will not have any choices left when it comes to your own personal ability to provide not just for you, but for your family. Folks, where can this lead? Nowhere good. But think about this. Before you say, oh, Carl, you're crazy. Well, contemplate this for a bit. What keeps the thinking person, not the mob, not the rioting mob that loots and breaks windows and just smashes things and burns them? What keeps the thinking person from deciding to go out and get really, really nasty? And remember, there is no such thing as security in the real world, other than for someone like the President of the United States. Why? Because you have family. You have a spouse. You have children. Okay? What stops people from deciding to really get ugly, as in dirty Civil War style ugly? Bosnia. Well, because they believe that their children are going to have a better life than they have, and they have something to lose. What do you do when it gets into people's minds? What are you going to do about it? When it gets into people's minds that their children are screwed, that no matter what they do, their children are going to have a failed future. That it's not about individual ability. It's not about going to school. It's not about getting good grades and studying and becoming something, whether it's college or not. I don't care if you're pulling wire or you're putting in AC systems. Well, if you're a rocket scientist, it doesn't make any difference. What if none of that matters? Because if you don't work for the big cog and the big machine, you're not going to have anything at all. No innovation. You're not going to have anything at all. You're going to be under the boot, under the thumb. Inflation is going to go riot. And when it does, you're not going to be able to eat. And then on top of that, you got all these screaming, literally, folks, screaming people running around. Wear a mask. You really think this stays peaceful? We still have an opportunity to do something about this. But you know what? The last video that I put up, it got about the same sort of number of views as this one probably will. Will you take this and sit down with 10 of your friends over a beer? Look, it was about 30 minutes at this point. And watch it with them. Go through the data. Go through the facts. Okay? Look at Hawaii. Look at the Hawaii data. Mask mandate. Not only did it do nothing, the case rate went up by a factor 10. What do you think's next? Oh, take this vaccine. Go take a look at what happened with FIP, a feline infectious disease caused by a virus. Sensitized everybody. What happens when you short circuit safety trials? That. You think it can't happen here? Of course it can happen here. What do you do when your employer, big company employer, no vaccine, no job? Think they can't? Of course they can. Why can't they? Are you going to take the time to see to it that 10 of your friends sit down and watch this thing on their phones? Are you going to make sure that after you get done doing that, the 10 more of their friends do it? Are you going to urge them to do that? Are they all going to go and do that? Because if you do, folks, 10 to 10, 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million, in 3 or 4 cycles of this, there's a few million people that have seen this thing, and all of a sudden the pushback becomes real. Look, there's crazies on the other side of this debate too. You know, this virus isn't real. It's just the cold. No, folks, it's not. There is excess mortality here. This is a bad bug if it gets you in a bad way. But look, Sevier County, we are a county full of fat and old people. You don't think so? Come down here and have a look. My body mass for a man of my age is probably in the lowest quintile, and maybe less. All right, that's just the way it is. All right, and yet, we have a death rate over 6 months that is identical to influenza. Unless you do stupid things and you do through manslaughter or deliberate negligence, you kill people, this virus is just simply not that bad. That's the data. So the question is this on this Labor Day. Am I going to look at my screen on YouTube tomorrow as we go through the weekend and then into next week? Am I going to see a couple thousand views? Or am I going to see a couple million? Because if you think you can vote your way out of this in November, you're wrong. You're very, very wrong. I don't care which way the election goes. It's going to make a bit of difference. You think the violence is going to stop there if Trump wins? Of course it won't. Do you think the violence will stop there if Trump loses? Of course it won't. Do you think that the small businesses will be perfectly okay in either case? The engine of dynamism for America over 250 years? No. How many of them are already gone? And how many of them will be? The time to choose, when you can still choose peacefully, folks, is now. Before they come into your restaurant, your place of business, and torch it. Oh, yeah, we'll have a few FBI guys go out to Portland and arrest a few people. Yeah, man, that'll really put the fear of God into them all. And how'd it work out in Rochester? Not so much, right? Make up your mind, folks. I don't know what you're going to choose to do. I don't know what anybody's going to choose to do. I'm running around with signs in the back of my car and working at getting some yard signs printed up. They're expensive, by the way. Political campaigns spend a lot of money on them. But you know where it starts? It starts with you. It starts with you going into a business and telling the owner that not only are you not going to comply, he can tell you to leave. It is private property. But if he does that, you're never coming back. Not now, not tomorrow, not ever. And the reason is because you support him and you want his business to be there, and it won't be if he doesn't stop it. Those are the facts. Let me take a guy.